All right, everybody, welcome to day number 8. Going back to the GHD toe to bar and then the low back. This one we're going to do an alternating Superman. Volume goes up just a little bit, adding a few reps. So if you were on the lower end of that 15 to 20, now we're on 18 to 25s. Just trying to get a little bit more volume, starting adding to those sets for each one of your core movements, especially for part of this kind of core warm-up and primer. Just trying to build that volume and really get those abs engaged and involved in all of those movements. So starting off with the GHDs, biggest thing on this one is the setup. Didn't talk about it a lot in that first week, just trying to really get into it. It is not 100% necessary to try and go to full extension, but always trying to get past at least parallel, so you're getting that more benefit than just doing a regular sit-up or something like that on the floor, like a V-up or something. So trying to make sure that you get that extra extension, getting the added benefit of using the actual GHD itself. That's the whole purpose of this, to use that and get that full extension, reaching to the floor all the way up to those foot pads or your toes at the top, so you get that full engagement and full crunch in the core. Coming over here for the toes to bar, still opting for me, I'm still opting for more of the strict variety. Remember, you could always start with hanging knee raises, then you could do hanging leg raises where legs go straight out, not initially going all the way up towards the bar. And then you can go into more of a kip swing, straight up and down, and then always add a little bit more tempo, slowing things down just a little bit. The more you slow it down, the more engagement you have, the more time under tension. Obviously, you're going to feel more and more from those abs and get a lot more engagement from your core, and really just reap the benefits of doing those with much more control and going through that full range of motion. Down on the floor, we're going to do alternating Superman. So notice how opposite hand, opposite foot is coming up. Still trying to keep full extension in the arms and in the knees as going through these movements. It's not hugely necessary for you to try and get a nice hold or anything like that. You're just trying to turn on the body, turn on those posterior engagement muscles, extend through the hips and spine, so that you are getting those full ranges of motion. A lot of time we all miss some of those movements going through, like even like a kettlebell swing. Yeah, you might stand up to full extension at the top, but you're not actually getting like some sort of arch, and they actually coach you not to do that so you don't squeeze the low back, especially under load. That's quite a bit to ask. So going through those alternating toes bar. Coming back into round 2, notice how this one, when you go through it, say if you were on the lower end last time, you did 2 rounds, you can always kind of cut the reps slightly and then go to 3 rounds. Say last time you did sets of 15 and you did 2 sets, you did 30 total. Maybe this time you do 3 rounds of 12, right? So that you're still adding up, so you get 6 more reps. That way the volume increases and you're getting more and more engagement each and every week, every time we come back to these GHDs. And same thing with the toes to bar, if you did, or your version of the toes to bar, any modification of it, trying to add a little extra volume. This is the one where we're trying to add volume sets. We get the heavier loads later on, especially moving through, but today is definitely much more of a volume day, especially finishing up with our 5 rounds on the Durante Core Challenge. It's over 200 reps. It is 200 reps of a bunch of different core movements, so trying to get as much as we can in that volume today. Now with my toes to bar here, do get a little swingy. I need to slow down that descent a little bit. That's what's driving those heels back, not making those look super strict. Getting that lower abs and those hip flexors involved more, and getting the more benefit and engagement of the lower abs, getting those bottom 4, even the upper part of those hip flexors coming through the quads. So slowing down, always thinking to be a little bit more control when you're coming in these movements. Kipping is not always beneficial. I know those CrossFitters, and I'm a CrossFitter myself, but that's just trying to be more efficient and according to your time. when you're trying to get better at something and build strength and development. Tempos, time under tension, that is always going to be your best bet moving through those different ranges of motion, and especially getting into these new movements that you may not do constantly all the time. Talk about those toes to bar real quick. If you have a grip limitation and you just can't hang on for more than 4 or 5 at a time, and you have like the slings that you can put your elbows into, or if you're doing those on like a dip station where you can actually like support from your arms, that is perfectly fine and acceptable. It's the exact same motion. Just because you're hanging does not mean it's going to be better or worse for you for any one of those movements. So if you are hanging, great, good for you. If you're not, no big deal. Going through, coming back into these alternating Supermans, trying to keep that engagement. Again, a little bit more of a cross body movement, so we're getting those contralateral type moves, which is what comes from running, right? Think about when you run, your opposite arm, opposite leg goes in front, and then the opposite arm, opposite leg goes in behind. So contralateral movement, that will be a huge transition and transfer into your running form and even your strength and technique as you go through. This last third round, I do opt for a little bit shorter set, trying to add to it. For me, the GHDs start to build up a little bit, especially in combination with the toes to bar, with the lower abs. So I do like the stretch in the low back and in the core, and then you really tighten up in those toes to bar movements. So I do opt for, I think, a round of 10 or half set here. So it's still adding to my volume, but I was doing 25 GHDs as well, going through each one of these. There you go. Warm-up primer is done in just under 8 minutes. Make sure you're staying hydrated, especially to set this one up. This next one's Durante Core Challenges, set up by David Durante. He was an Olympian, and he's part of now Power Monkey Fitness, if you want to go follow and watch him. He was a gymnastic competitor, especially for, I believe, all around and on rings specifically. He was an Olympian, right? Got some medals, and he helped kind of choose the team for the USA men's, especially for Beijing. I believe he was there, and was the team captain and stuff like that. So if you want to know more about him, go check him out. This is one of his many challenges going through. I've studied underneath David a few times, taken a couple of his seminars with Power Monkey. I highly recommend it. But here's what you're going to do. 5 rounds, 10 hollow rocks, 10 V-ups, 10 tuck-ups into a 10-second hollow body hold. You're going to rest for 1 minute and then try and go through. Goal would be trying to minimize any transition and rest time in between movements and sets. Really trying to keep form on these. Going through, these are very potent ab exercises. They can be extremely challenging to go through, but try and limit any kind of modifications that you do use. You can always go to a single leg V-up instead of going both feet. You can always tuck up into that ball for the hollow rocks, and then for the seated knee tucks, you can keep the lower back down rather than going all the way up to your glutes at the top as you go through. especially after all those abs that we did before and the primer set. These are going to get very, very weak very quickly because of those hip flexion movements. All right, I believe I started the 10-minute mark coming up here. Remember, try and keep your eyes on the clock, keeping those rest times as strict as you can down to that 1 minute time frame. So starting off with the hollow rocks, trying to stay as tight in the small little arch as I can. Very, very smooth. Try not to let that low back arch too much and go into like a flat back or anything like that. So trying to keep that rounded spine. Going into the V-ups, reaching up towards the toes. Hands should meet the feet above your head if you're doing these completely, whether you're doing single or double leg. Double leg is definitely going to be more of a challenge. I like to let the heels go all the way down on these, more for the full range of motion benefit, not just trying to keep tension the entire time. You're going to get plenty of those like you do on these seated knee tucks, keeping the feet up, and the same thing with the hollow body rocks. Those are definitely going to keep tension on the abs completely. So getting that millisecond of full extension and recovery through the core is not going to be that crazy. On these hollow body ones, just trying to make sure you keep the shoulders up, keeping the feet up off the ground. 10 seconds. Notice how that tension builds up very, very quickly. Then you have a 1 minute rest set up here, and then going right back into round 2, 3, 4, and even 5. You're going to start to burn out most likely going through all of these movements. They will add up very, very, very quickly. So not necessarily trying to keep your splits the same. I'd rather see you go unbroken for maybe 2 sets, maybe 3 for some of us, and then you move into going into rounds 3, 4, and 5 towards the end, and just trying to go into survival mode. Now these movements, even if you are going in and you're like, there's no way I can do the full 40 reps unbroken, that's fine. Pick a movement that you want to go unbroken on. Maybe it's the V-ups. Maybe it's the seated knee tucks. Pick one that you can challenge yourself to try and hold on to a bigger set and keep tension and move quickly through it. And then the other ones, you can kind of minimize that rest time as needed going through each one of those reps. So that's how I would approach this one, really trying to focus on moving through unbroken sets of each and every movement. Coaching myself here on these hollow rocks is probably arch a little bit more. Notice how the low back kind of has some daylight underneath it as I'm going through these movements and the rib cage expands up. Goal will be able to try and keep the low back down firmly against the ground on all these moves, even these V-ups, even the seated knee tucks when you're laying back at extension. Now obviously that would be a little bit more difficult, more of a challenge, so that's something you could certainly level up as you go through these movements, trying to keep the low back firmly down even on your rest phases to keep those abs contracted. As you get stronger, that'd be kind of a super high bonus level for most of us going through those, because these 200 reps after all the GHDs, toes to bar, and the alternating Supermans, that is going to build up significantly in that volume. You're talking about easily a 300 rep day roughly on your abs on these. So as you're going through, that's something you can really think about. And then the volume-wise. Volume is something you can keep track of. Track how many total reps you do for just your abs and your core. A lot of those things do add up over time. Now trying to get up to just a huge maximal number, that's not necessarily beneficial to do as many as possible. Kind of as we touched on the sit-up, the heavy 5-rep sit-up day. Trying to build some actual mass and strength in your abs rather than just muscular endurance is what you're aiming for going through. Now, that doesn't mean can't make your core extremely strong doing a ton of volume, but you will not get a massive change in your core. It'll just be super flat, super toned, going through everything rather than trying to get into that contradiction, and you'll kind of get more of a benefit of strength training and more of that high volume type of work, getting some hypertrophy in there with size. Think about like most bodybuilders or competitive fitness athletes and health and fitness realm, having that contradiction makes a huge difference. You don't want just size, you don't want just definition, you want a combination of both, and that is a big thing going into these movements and this whole program that I have designed and developed here. As you can tell by this time, core is starting to really break down. I'm doing everything in basically sets of 1, doing singles all the way through, trying to chip my way, trying to keep the rest time at a minimum, going through each one of these moves and trying to get through these as best I can. Still trying to keep the quality up there, getting up on my hips, getting the knees bent and the heels close to my glutes, trying to get my hands to touch my feet rather than shortening that movement. Remember, this is a modification you'll see as I get into my 4th and 5th round. I'll actually start keeping the low back down a little bit more. That will put a little less tension on the upper core, and it makes it a little bit easier to get through, but it's still getting that seated knee tuck variety going through. Notice how these hollow rocks, the low back is pretty high off the ground. Abs are definitely feeling it. As you can see, I roll over here going through it. So there's still challenges at every level, no matter where you're at. This is a big one for every single one of us to get a big challenge from. If you're doing sets unbroken, great for you. If you get to the point where you can do all 5 rounds and you're like, well, that wasn't bad, then, I mean, first, awesome, kudos. But start lessening the rest time. Drop down to 50 seconds, 45, 30. See if you can go through the whole 5 rounds just for time without using any rest time in between. There's definitely more of a challenge for that, going through those as I get into my last few rounds here. I am really battling trying to get this under 20 minutes total. I probably rested too long after the warm-up set, but core was definitely fatigued, feeling it as I get through these. Trying to keep all these workouts in about 20 minutes or less for most of us. for most of these movements. Some of them towards the end will get a little bit longer, especially as we add a little bit of volume, but that's the goal. 20 minutes or less to get your abs in shape in 6 weeks. That's the whole program to built in. Intense, hard, difficult, challenging, but it is there designed to make it beneficial for you and to reap the benefits of that. So you're actually getting all of the movements, all of the different planes of motion. All of it is a big challenge for every single one of us. Just like that, finished up. I'll see you guys tomorrow.